Welcome, gentle soul, to another quiet journey into the past. Tonight, we drift back to the hushed corridors of Tudor England, where ambition, faith, and fragile hope shaped the fate of a queen. This is the story of Anne Boleyn, a woman whose brilliance and resolve changed a kingdom, yet whose life ended beneath a silent sword. Perhaps you're settling in after a long day, or maybe your eyes are already growing heavy. Wherever you are, I'm grateful you've joined me. If these calm bedtime travels through history help you rest, I'd love for you to subscribe. It means you'll always have another gentle story waiting when night returns. You begin in the quiet green of Kent, where the air is damp and the hedgerows hold the scent of wet earth. The year is around 1501. England has a Tudor king who is still new to his throne, and the wars that once tore the realm apart have cooled, but not vanished. In a modest yet ambitious household at Hever Castle, a girl named Anne Boleyn opens her eyes to a world that will one day speak her name in whispers. The Boleyn family is not ancient nobility. They are, instead, an example of careful ascent. Her grandfather was a London merchant who dealt in wine. Her father, Thomas Boleyn, has taken those merchant roots and spun them upward, serving as a diplomat and courtier. He knows the value of languages and alliances, of gifts well chosen and letters perfectly phrased. Her mother, Elizabeth Howard, belongs to an older noble line, a quiet thread of prestige that helps weave the Boleyns into the fabric of court life. Anne's early days are not the lavish picture you might expect of someone destined to be queen. Hever Castle is sturdy rather than grand. The stone walls keep out the cold but also the light. Small windows drip condensation. You can almost hear the scratch of the rushes on the floor as servants replace them with fresh ones, scented with herbs to cover the smell of damp wool and cooking fires. Daily life is rhythmic. Prayers at dawn, the measured toll of the local church bell, the steady work of servants maintaining the estate. For a young girl of her standing, education begins early and is surprisingly thorough. You might imagine her mornings filled with basic reading and the art of fine handwriting, lessons conducted in a small solar where the fire pops in the grate. French phrases are introduced sooner than you'd expect, for her father knows that the language of the French court opens doors across Europe. Music, too, is part of her day. The lute, the virginals, and the soft rise of her voice in simple songs. These are not idle diversions but essential skills for a future lady of the court. Anne is the second daughter. Her elder sister Mary and her brother George share the castle schoolroom and its long afternoons of practice. Childhood games often mimic the adult world. Miniature dances, mock feasts, small theatrics for visiting relatives. They rehearse the gestures of the powerful without yet knowing the stakes. Outside, the Kentish countryside provides its own lessons. Riding horses on muddy tracks, recognizing the change of seasons by the texture of the soil, understanding which plants will feed and which will poison. Survival, even for gentlefolk, is a kind of daily study. As Anne grows, her father's career pulls the family closer to the pulse of power. Thomas Boleyn serves as envoy to the Low Countries and later to France. These appointments are not mere travel opportunities. They are the quiet engines of ambition. Each successful mission brings another reward, another friend in high places. Anne's future will be shaped by this careful diplomacy. When she is perhaps 12 or 13, a decision is made that will set her apart from many English girls. She will continue her education abroad. The court of Margaret of Austria in the Netherlands is chosen first. Imagine the journey. Cold English ports, the creak of a small ship crossing the channel, the flat lands of Flanders unfolding under a gray sky. Here, Anne enters a world of scholars and etiquette far removed from Hever. She studies not only language and music, but also the fine points of courtly conversation, scripture, and the new humanist ideas spreading quietly across Europe. This period matters because it builds the quiet steel beneath her future. Observers later note that Anne carries herself with a continental polish rare among English ladies. She learns how to hold a room with posture and wit rather than noise. candlelit halls of Brussels teach her that silence can command as much attention as words. From the Netherlands, she travels to France, joining the household of Queen Claude. Here the atmosphere is even richer. The French court is alive with art, fashion, and debate. Painters experiment with perspective, poets flirt with new verse forms, and courtiers sharpen their repartee like fine blades. And absorbs it all. She becomes fluent in French, skilled in dance, and adept at the subtle, layered communication that thrives in palaces. The French ladies speak of religion, politics, and love with equal fluency, and in listens. These are the boring details that shape destiny. The endless practice of bowing correctly, of choosing the right fabric for a sleeve, of reciting a psalm without a stumble. These are her tools. While Europe edges toward religious upheaval and kings bargain over territory, and learns how to survive the small storms of daily power. Who speaks first at a banquet, how long to hold a curtsy, when to answer and when to remain still. Back in England, her father continues to climb. Every letter from abroad carries not just family affection but also intelligence. Names of potential allies, subtle shifts in continental politics. Anne's education is not just for refinement. It is preparation. When she finally returns to England after several years, she brings with her a grace that is unmistakable. Those who meet her notice her dark eyes, quick mind, and the slightly French tilt of her manners. She is no longer simply Thomas Boleyn's daughter. She is a young woman marked by the wider world. You can picture her arrival at the English court in the service of Queen Catherine of Aragon, the Spanish-born wife of Henry VIII. The English court is more provincial than the dazzling salons of France, but Anne carries her continental polish like a quiet lantern. Here, beneath the banners of the Tudor Rose, she begins the next chapter of her life, one that will pull her toward the king himself. But for now, in these early years, the story is still a slow current rather than a storm, and moves through the palace corridors as a lady-in-waiting, observing the rhythms of royal life. The morning mass, the endless banquets heavy with roasted meats, the late-night dances lit by flickering torches. She watches how Queen Catherine manages a court filled with rival families and hidden agendas. She learns which smiles are genuine and which are masks. What did she dream in those quiet nights, when the candles were snuffed and only the low murmur of servants echoed through the stone halls? Perhaps she thought of the French court's music or the Dutch scholars' debates. Perhaps she simply planned the next day's careful steps, each movement a small rehearsal for a future she could not yet see. Anne's childhood and early education might seem, at first glance, like ordinary chapters in a noblewoman's life, less the stuff of drama and more the slow, persistent training of a patient survivor. Yet it is exactly these quiet details that shaped the woman who would one day challenge a king and alter the faith of a nation. And so, as you picture the girl who will become a queen, you might ask yourself, how much of a destiny is written in the quiet hours that no one records? You follow Anne Boleyn as she steps once more onto English soil. The air is heavier here than in France, damp with river mist and wood smoke. It is the year 1522, perhaps a little earlier or later, depending on the record, but the moment matters less than the feeling. A young woman returning home with a new polish that sets her apart, and is about 19, carrying the subtle fragrance of French salons and the easy confidence of someone who has seen more of the world than most English courtiers ever will. Her clothes, though not ostentatious, show a sharper cut, a little extra thought in the drape of the sleeve, the tilt of a hood. Those who meet her sense the difference immediately. She speaks French with the fluency of a native and moves with the poise of someone trained to make every gesture deliberate. Her father, Thomas Boleyn, recognizes the advantage. He has risen higher during her years abroad, gaining favor as a skilled diplomat and courtier to King Henry VIII. England itself is subtly shifting. Henry, still married to Queen Catherine of Aragon, is vigorous and energetic, a king of tournaments and pageantry. The young nation, only a few decades past the turbulence of the Wars of the Roses, is eager for displays of stability and wealth, and enters court life as a lady-in-waiting to Queen Catherine, a position that demands endless attention to detail. Her days are carefully structured. Morning prayers, dressing the Queen, serving during meals, accompanying her during audiences, and participating in the entertainments of evening. These routines might appear monotonous, yet they are the precise rhythm of power. Every nod, every lowered gaze, every perfectly timed smile is a quiet calculation. From the very first, and notices the contrasts between English and French court culture. The English court is grand but a little provincial. The banquets are heavy with roasted meats and thick sauces, the music loud and hearty, the dances energetic but lacking the intricate grace of French steps. Anne's training sets her apart. Her more delicate movements, her subtle wit in conversation, catch the attention of many. One of her first notable appearances is at a pageant known as the Chateau Vert Masque in 1522, an elaborate court entertainment staged for Shrovetide, and performs alongside other young ladies in costumes of emerald and white, representing virtues such as perseverance and kindness. Though she plays only a symbolic role, the performance reveals her elegance. Observers note her expressive eyes and the way she seems both part of the spectacle and somehow beyond it. Daily life in Queen Catherine's household offers both routine and education, and learns the art of court diplomacy, which often involves saying very little. She observes how Catherine, dignified and devout, maintains her authority as a Spanish princess and a Tudor queen. Catherine's days are filled with religious devotion, careful management of household finances, and a quiet patience with a husband whose attentions wander, and also becomes aware of the subtle hierarchy among the ladies-in-waiting. Friendships form, but rivalries simmer. The sharing of a needlework pattern or a new song might conceal a strategic alliance. Gossip is currency. A misplaced word can travel the length of the palace in an afternoon. In these corridors, silence can be as valuable as speech. Beyond the royal apartments, the larger world of the English court beckons. Henry VIII presides over justs and hunting parties, revels and feasts that stretch long into the night. The king enjoys music, theology, and conversation. Courtiers compete for his notice with flattery and feats of skill, and watches, listens, and learns. Her education abroad has trained her for precisely this environment, the measured dance of proximity to power. It is here that Anne's older sister, Mary Boleyn, plays a quiet but telling role. Mary has already caught Henry's eye and, by many accounts, has been his mistress. Their liaison is not unusual. Henry's affairs are well known, but it provides and with a close view of the king's appetite and the fleeting nature of his favor. Mary's experience may serve as a silent warning. While Anne fulfills her duties, her father continues to position the Boleyn family for greater influence. Ambassadorships, property negotiations, and alliances with other noble families move forward in the background. Each success tightens the Boleyn's web within the court. Anne's presence is part of this larger strategy, though it is also her own life taking shape, one carefully placed step at a time. Yet the court is not merely a place of music and feasts. England is quietly restless. Across Europe, whispers of religious reform begin to circulate. Martin Luther's writings travel by ship and by word of mouth. Scholars debate the authority of Rome, and, fluent in French and conversant with the more progressive thinkers she encountered abroad, understands the tension more clearly than many of her peers. She reads devotional works in the vernacular, which at the time is a bold, even suspect, practice. These texts, filled with ideas of personal faith and the questioning of papal power, leave their mark. As weeks turn to months, Anne becomes known for her sharp intellect as well as her style. Courtiers seek her out for conversation, drawn to her wit and the slight edge of her humor. She is careful, however, never to overstep. In a world where a woman's reputation can rise or fall on a single rumor, she guards her words as tightly as her jewels. Through all of this, Henry VIII remains a distant figure in Anne's daily routine. She sees him at feasts, hears him at mass, glimpses him in the tilt yard as he lowers his lance for the charge. The king is larger than life, tall, broad-shouldered, confident. But he is still Catherine's husband and England's anointed ruler. For now, and is a quiet observer. Imagine an evening in the palace. The air heavy with the scent of beeswax candles and roasted game. Musicians play a pavane while the courtiers drift between conversation and dance. And moves gracefully, her dark eyes catching the low firelight. Perhaps Henry notices her from across the room, or perhaps not yet. The important thing is that she is there, a still point in the whirl of color and sound, already gathering the subtle attentions that will later define her fate. Life in the Queen's household is steady but not without its small dramas. Servants whisper of political alliances, merchants arrive with bolts of rare fabric, and ambassadors from France and Spain watch each other with careful smiles. And listens. Her time abroad has taught her that power often hides in the unremarkable moments. A sideways glance, a pause before a reply, the delay of a letter that might shift a treaty. As she walks the stone corridors at night, perhaps she recalls the candlelit halls of France or the scholarly rooms of the Netherlands. Those memories are part of her now, shaping the way she moves, the way she speaks, the way she judges those around her. They are quiet tools she will one day wield with precision. Her story at this point contains no obvious drama, no thunderclap of destiny. Instead, it unfolds in the small, patient details of court life. A new gown sewn with discreet elegance, a song sung in perfect French, a single remark remembered by the right listener. These are the building blocks of influence, laid slowly, one atop the other. You can almost hear the faint echo of questions that will later become urgent. How long can a queen who bears no surviving son hold her place beside a king whose pride demands an heir? How long can a woman like and remain simply an attendant, her intelligence and poise unnoticed by the man who commands the realm? For now, the answers rest in silence. And walks through the great hall, the tapestries stirring slightly in a winter draught, her footsteps soft on the worn stone. The glitter of the English court surrounds her, but she is more than a decoration in its pageant. She is, though no one yet realizes it, a slow-moving force, and the current of her life is beginning to turn. And you might wonder, as the candles gutter and the night deepens, when does quiet observation become the first step toward destiny? Picture the English court in the mid-1520s. Winter fires smoke in the long stone halls. The smell of wax and roasted meat hangs in the air, and music from viols drifts through the galleries. King Henry VIII is in his mid-30s, broad-shouldered, athletic, and still proud of his skill in the tilt yard. Queen Catherine of Aragon remains dignified and devout, but she has not given Henry the one thing he craves most: a surviving male heir. Their only living child is the young Princess Mary. This quiet fact, repeated in murmured conversations behind chamber doors, begins to shape every movement of the court. Anne Boleyn has now spent several years as a lady-in-waiting. Her reputation for wit and graceful conversation has grown. She dresses with a continental flair, dark fabrics with subtle embroidery, French hoods that frame her face rather than hiding her hair. She is careful never to outshine the queen, but her presence is hard to miss. Courtiers speak of her quick mind, her ability to make a single glance feel like a secret. It is during a season of masks and hunting parties that Henry's attention sharpens. The king is known for noticing beauty, but Anne is not merely beautiful. When she speaks, she does so with a calm assurance learned in the courts of Burgundy and France. Her French is fluent, her music refined, her manner a mixture of respect and quiet independence. She listens intently, but when she answers, her words carry a precision that lingers. At first, the king's interest is subtle. A few additional words after a dance. A question about her time in France. A a compliment delivered in passing about the cut of her gown or the elegance of her lute playing. Yet the court is a place where even the smallest attention is magnified. Whispers ripple outward. Was Henry's gaze a little longer than necessary? Did Anne bow her head more slowly than custom required? Letters begin to pass between them, carefully written, often carried by trusted courtiers. Henry's handwriting, bold and eager, contrasts with Anne's measured replies. He expresses admiration and desire. She responds with courtesy but also a kind of distance. She does not yield easily. This distance is deliberate, and has seen how swiftly the king's favor can fade. Her own sister Mary's brief relationship with Henry stands as a silent warning, and knows that to be a passing mistress is to be forgotten when the king's attention moves on. She also understands the stakes of royal affection. A king's passion can bring gifts and titles, but it can also breed enemies and danger. When Henry presses more openly, and chooses a path unusual for a courtier seeking advancement, she refuses to become his lover. She writes, or perhaps says in person, that she will not give herself except as a wife. This is not a romantic gesture alone. It is strategy. In an age when royal mistresses often fade into obscurity, and is setting terms that raise her value and her peril simultaneously, Henry is intrigued rather than discouraged. The challenge excites him. His letters grow more insistent, filled with professions of love and promises of a future together. He begins to envision a solution that will defy the foundations of European Christendom. He will seek an annulment of his marriage to Catherine and make Anne his queen. For now, the notion is only a spark, but sparks in a dry field can become wildfires. Henry consults scholars and theologians, probing biblical passages that might justify a claim that his marriage to Catherine was invalid because she had been his brother's widow. Advisors like Cardinal Wolsey consider the diplomatic obstacles. Rome is far away, the Pope cautious, and Catherine's nephew is none other than the powerful Emperor Charles V. The political web is vast and sticky. Meanwhile, Anne's daily life continues amid this growing tension. She attends the Queen, joins evening entertainments, and exchanges polite greetings with the king in full view of others. Yet behind the formalities, their private correspondence deepens. Henry sends small gifts, jewels, hunting prizes, tokens of devotion, and accepts them carefully, never appearing grasping. Each acceptance is balanced with modesty, a careful dance that both feeds and restrains the king's desire. The court watches. Some whisper admiration for her resolve. Others mutter that she is ambitious, even dangerous. Friends caution her about the hazards of holding a king at bay. Enemies begin to sharpen their words, but Anne remains composed. Her years abroad have trained her for precisely this moment. The art of waiting, the discipline of silence. Life beyond the palace walls continues in its slow rhythm. Farmers tending winter fields, merchants bargaining at London's markets, priests delivering homilies to quiet parish churches. Yet inside the royal chambers, a private drama gathers force. Henry's frustration with Rome will eventually shift the course of English religion itself. At this early stage, no one can see the full path ahead, but those who sense the undercurrent know something momentous is stirring. Imagine a winter evening in the palace at Greenwich. Snow muffles the river sounds outside. In a small chamber lit by a single candelabrum, Henry and Anne speak in low voices. Perhaps a trusted servant stands watch at the door. Their words are careful, their glances charged. Henry speaks of love and destiny, and, poised, answers with measured grace. She does not promise, but she does not retreat. To the casual observer, these encounters might seem like mere courtly flirtation. Yet every look, every carefully chosen word, presses England closer to a fracture. The king's heart is entwining itself with a woman who refuses the expected path. And Anne, though still officially only a lady-in-waiting, is beginning to understand the magnitude of what she has set in motion. How much of this, you might wonder, is choice, and how much is the silent momentum of history? Did Anne truly believe she could hold the king at arm's length forever? Or was she already imagining a crown, knowing that such a prize could cost everything? As the musicians in the great hall pack away their lutes and the candles burn low, the question lingers in the hush of the palace corridors. When a king's desire becomes a kingdom's question, who can still claim to guide their own fate? The air of the English court thickens with quiet speculation. It is the late 1520s, and the corridors of Whitehall and Greenwich carry more than the smell of beeswax and roasting meat. They carry the hush of rumor. Everyone knows that King Henry VIII longs for a male heir. Everyone also knows that Queen Catherine of Aragon has not given him one. Their daughter Mary grows, bright and serious, but in the eyes of Tudor succession law, she cannot secure the dynasty as firmly as a son. Henry's desire for a legitimate male heir is not mere vanity. The memory of the Wars of the Roses, when rival factions of the English nobility fought bloody battles over succession, still lingers like smoke in the national memory. A single misstep in inheritance could plunge the realm into chaos again. Henry, who prizes stability and the grandeur of his line, feels the pressure daily. Into this tense atmosphere moves Anne Boleyn, still outwardly a lady of the Queen's household but now unmistakably the center of the King's attention. Their private exchanges continue, letters filled with endearments, gifts chosen with care, but Anne maintains her firm boundary. She will not yield except as a wife. This insistence, both daring and calculated, slowly transforms Henry's infatuation into a mission. By 1527, Henry begins to look for a way to end his marriage to Catherine. To his mind, their union is flawed from the start. Years earlier, Catherine had been briefly married to Henry's older brother, Arthur, who died young. Church law permits such a union only if it can be proven that Catherine's first marriage was never consummated. Henry seizes on a verse from the book of Leviticus. If a man shall take his brother's wife, it is an unclean thing, they shall be childless. He interprets this as divine judgment on his lack of sons. Cardinal Thomas Wolsey, Henry's chief minister and trusted servant, is tasked with navigating the perilous path toward an annulment. The plan seems straightforward at first: petition the Pope for a dispensation. Yet the political reality is anything but simple. Catherine's nephew is Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, whose armies have recently sacked Rome. The Pope, Clement VII, is effectively under Charles's control. Granting Henry's request would mean offending one of the most powerful rulers in Europe. Still, Henry presses forward. Wolsey organizes a special legate in court in London, summoning Cardinal Campeggio from Rome to hear the case. The summer of 1529 sees the proceedings begin with solemn ceremony. Lawyers, bishops, and royal representatives gathered beneath the vaulted ceilings of Blackfriars. Catherine, dignified and calm, refuses to step aside. She rises before the court and declares her marriage valid before God, insisting she came to Henry's bed a virgin and remains his true wife. Her quiet strength impresses even those who doubt her cause. Outside the formal hearings, ordinary life continues. Merchants crowd London Bridge, fishmongers call out their wares, and parish priests preach the familiar rhythms of the Massachusetts. Yet even in distant shires, villagers hear whispers of the king's great matter. A monarch seeking to set aside a lawful queen is not merely a private concern. It touches the very order of the realm, and, meanwhile, remains mostly in the background of these official proceedings. But her influence is unmistakable. She encourages Henry to read reformist texts that question papal authority, works by thinkers such as William Tyndale and other early advocates of an English Bible. Whether she does so out of deep conviction or political foresight is debated even centuries later, but the effect is the same. Henry begins to imagine an England where royal power need not bow to Rome. The king's frustration grows as the months drag on. Campeggio delays, sending messages back to Rome. The Pope offers polite evasions but no decision. Wolsey, once the architect of Henry's hopes, finds himself blamed for the stalemate. His enemies at court, sensing opportunity, whisper against him. By the autumn of 1529, Wolsey is dismissed from power, his long career collapsing under the weight of royal displeasure. Through all this, Anne holds her position with remarkable composure. She remains outwardly modest, rarely flaunting her unique status, yet she continues to capture Henry's devotion. He writes of the illness of love, of the pain of separation when she leaves court to avoid scandal. She responds with careful affection, never surrendering the advantage of restraint. Consider a winter evening at Hampton Court. The tapestries dull in the firelight, the corridors echoing with soft footfalls. Somewhere in a private chamber, Henry paces while scribes sharpen quills for yet another letter to Rome. In another wing, Anne sits with her ladies, embroidering by candlelight, aware that the king's ambitions and the future of the English church now hinge on decisions made far beyond these walls. The broader currents of Europe move around them. Martin Luther's reforms continue to ripple through German states. Printing presses spread pamphlets challenging papal supremacy. Merchants carry these ideas across the Channel, hidden among bolts of cloth and barrels of wine. England listens, half curious, half afraid. By 1530, Henry's patience is wearing thin. He begins to assemble a circle of advisors, Thomas Cranmer, Thomas Cromwell, and others, who see in his dilemma an opportunity to reshape the kingdom. They argue that the king, as God's anointed sovereign, has spiritual authority within his own realm. Perhaps he does not need Rome's blessing at all. The notion is radical, but it grows stronger each time another papal envoy returns without progress. For Catherine, the years of uncertainty are heavy. She continues her devotions, cares for Princess Mary, and refuses every suggestion that she retire quietly to a convent. Her dignity commands respect even among those who favor Anne. To many common people, Catherine remains the rightful queen, beloved for her piety and perseverance. In the hush of these years, Anne and Henry's relationship becomes a living question rather than a settled fact. They are bound by affection and ambition, yet the crown remains out of reach, and knows that delay can be dangerous. Every season that passes increases the risk of political backlash or the king's wandering eye. Yet she also knows that surrender before marriage would forfeit the very thing she has guarded so carefully, her power to shape her own fate. Imagine the tension of those long evenings when Henry, impatient and restless, presses and for assurance, and she answers with quiet firmness. She will be his wife or nothing at all. The flicker of candlelight on carved oak panels, the muffled steps of servants beyond the door, the echo of distant church bells, all frame a struggle that is as much about will as about love. What began as a personal entanglement is now a matter of state. The king's quest for annulment will soon pull England toward a breach with Rome and a reordering of religious life that will touch every parish and every soul. But for now, the question remains suspended, like a drawn breath before a storm. And as the court settles into another uneasy night, you might ask, when a monarch's private longing begins to reshape the faith of a nation, is it desire or destiny that leads the way? The slow turn of the English seasons brings no resolution to Henry's great matter. By the early 1530s, the king's frustration has hardened into resolve. He will have Anne Boleyn as his wife, and he will have a son to secure the Tudor line, even if the price is a break with centuries of religious tradition. And herself has become more than a private passion. She is now the living emblem of change, her presence a constant reminder that the old order can be challenged. In candlelit galleries and perfumed chambers, she speaks to Henry not only of affection but of possibility, a new England where the monarch's authority is unshackled from Rome. Around Henry, Anne gathers a circle of men who sense that history is tilting. Thomas Cromwell, sharp-eyed and tireless, begins to advise the king on how Parliament might lend legal weight to royal supremacy. Thomas Cranmer, learned and conciliatory, offers theological arguments that the king himself, as God's anointed, is the supreme head of the church in England. These men are not mere courtiers. They are architects of revolution, and encourages their thinking. She shares with Henry forbidden books, an English translation of the New Testament, commentaries by reformers who question papal authority. Whether her own convictions run as deep as theirs is difficult to say, but her actions push the king further from the Pope's orbit. In private discussions, she speaks of conscience and the need for scripture in the common tongue. Her words, carried on the hush of velvet-draped rooms, lodge in Henry's imagination. By 1531, the English clergy are forced to recognize Henry as protector and supreme head of the church, so far as the law of Christ allows. It is a carefully worded step, but a step nonetheless. The old balance wavers. Bishops who hesitate risk royal anger. Those who comply risk eternal censure. The kingdom listens as sermons begin to hint, only hint, that obedience to the crown may stand above obedience to Rome. Anne's influence is everywhere yet nowhere written. She does not sit in council or speak in parliament. Instead, she moves through the corridors of Whitehall with quiet confidence. When she passes, courtiers bow with a mix of respect and calculation. Even her enemies admit her poise. Tall, dark-eyed, dressed in French silks that catch the light like water, she is a figure of fascination and unease, a lady whose very presence marks the twilight of the old faith. By late 1532, Henry's patience with diplomatic maneuvering is exhausted. In the autumn, he travels to Calais to meet Francis I of France, hoping to secure a continental ally, and accompanies him, received with honors that signal her status as something more than mistress. Shortly after their return to England, the final step is taken. Sometime in the winter of 1532–33, historians debate the exact date. Henry and Anne are married in secret. The ceremony is quiet, witnessed by only a handful, and is already carrying the king's child, and secrecy serves both prudence and urgency. To the world, however, Catherine of Aragon remains queen, and the Pope has issued no annulment. England now stands on the edge of open defiance. The following months move swiftly. In May 1533, Archbishop Cranmer convenes a special court that declares Henry's marriage to Catherine null and void. Days later, Cranmer pronounces the king's union with invalid. The Pope responds with excommunication. Henry responds with indifference, and with a flurry of statutes that will remake England's spiritual life. The Act of Supremacy, 1534, names Henry VIII as the supreme head of the Church of England, severing the centuries-old bond with Rome. Monasteries will soon be dissolved, their wealth flowing into the royal treasury. Priests and commoners alike will be required to swear an oath acknowledging the king's new authority. Those who refuse, among them the scholar Thomas More and the steadfast Bishop John Fisher, will pay with their lives. Through these seismic changes, Anne is both participant and symbol. When she walks in procession as Queen of England, crowned at Westminster in June 1533, the cheers are loud but not unanimous. Some Londoners murmur prayers for Catherine, others throw insults at the concubine, yet the spectacle is magnificent. Cloth of gold banners, fragrant rushes strewn across the streets, trumpets announcing a new era. Anne's first pregnancy carries the hope of an entire kingdom. Henry waits for a son who will secure the Tudor future and justify every risk he has taken. But in September 1533, Anne gives birth to a daughter, Elizabeth. The king's initial disappointment is real, but he masks it with outward celebration. The infant princess is healthy, and Henry convinces himself that sons will follow. And, however, understands the delicate balance. Her position depends on her ability to provide an heir. She resumes her role at court with grace, presenting herself as the rightful queen, but whispers of doubt and hostility never cease. Supporters of Catherine, loyal to the old faith, see the birth of a girl as a sign of divine disfavor. Pamphlets circulate in taverns and marketplaces, some so bold as to call Anne a witch. Daily life at court reflects the new order. Latin masses give way to English prayers. Monks and nuns face the closing of their houses. Merchants and landowners scramble for opportunities as monastic lands are sold off. Some rejoice in the change. Others fear the loss of familiar rights and the wrath of God. England is no longer merely a Catholic realm, but a kingdom forging its own path. Amid this upheaval, Anne continues to shape Henry's policies. She advocates for reformist scholars, protects those translating scripture, and argues against the persecution of certain evangelical preachers. Her influence, however, provokes resentment. Courtiers who once served Catherine now bide their time, watching for any sign of weakness in the new queen. Consider an evening in the newly built Whitehall Palace, firelight flickering across the painted ceilings. Henry, broad-shouldered and restless, debates with Cromwell about the dissolution of monasteries, and listens, adding quiet observations about the need for pious teaching and the dangers of superstition. Outside, the Thames carries the reflection of moonlight and the distant sound of church bells. Bells that ring now for a kingdom divided. Anne's presence remains electrifying. She can be sharp-tongued, quick to challenge, unwilling to play the silent consort. To Henry, this is part of her allure, but to many nobles it is unsettling. They are accustomed to queens who intercede gently, not women who debate policy with the king. Each word she speaks adds to the legend of a queen who helped unmake the medieval order. Yet even in triumph, shadows gather. Henry's temper is unpredictable, and the absence of a male heir gnaws at him. And suffers a miscarriage in 1534, a private sorrow that becomes a public concern. Rivals at court, among them Jane Seymour, a quiet lady-in-waiting, begin to draw the king's eye. The same forces that once favored and now whisper against her, just as they once whispered against Catherine. But for the moment, in these early years of the 1530s, Anne Boleyn stands at the very center of power. She is not merely the king's wife. She is the catalyst of a national transformation. Her rise has severed England from Rome, reshaped its laws, and set in motion a reformation whose echoes will sound for centuries. As night settles over London and the bells of St. Paul's toll the hour, you might wonder, did Anne foresee the cost of such influence, or did she simply walk the only path left open to a woman of ambition and resolve? The English court of 1534 hums with ceremony and unease. Anne Boleyn is queen in every outward sense. Her crest stitched onto banners, her servants in livery of green and white, her seat beside Henry at state banquets. Yet beneath the music and the glittering tapestries lies a tension as sharp as any blade. A crown won through upheaval must be defended each day, from the moment of her coronation, and carries the burden of expectation. Every glance from Henry's courtiers weighs her down with a single question: where is the prince? The birth of Princess Elizabeth had been greeted with outward festivity, but Henry's eyes still search for a son who will secure the Tudor name. Ministers and ambassadors note every sign of Anne's health, every rumor of a new pregnancy. The stakes are clear: without a male heir, her triumph may prove brief. Henry himself is a study in contradictions. He continues to shower Anne with gifts, rare jewels, silks from Venice, music composed in her honor, but flashes of impatience betray him. The king who once praised her wit now sometimes answers with silence. His court is no longer the simple household of a Catholic monarch. It is the engine of a new national church. Petitions, proclamations, and disputes over monasteries occupy his days. The Reformation and helped spark now grows larger than either of them, and it demands attention that love alone cannot command. Meanwhile, England stirs with discontent. In northern shires and quiet villages, parish priests still cling to the old Latin rites. Some congregations whisper prayers for Queen Catherine, refusing to acknowledge the new order. Taxes to fund Henry's wars bite hard, and the closure of monasteries removes long-trusted sources of charity. Ordinary people feel the changes in their bread and their alms as much as in their prayers, and senses the shifting ground. She continues to champion reform, protecting translators of scripture and urging Henry to further cleanse the church of superstition. Yet each act that pleases reformers enrages traditionalists. She is praised as a patroness of learning and reviled as a heretic, sometimes in the same day. Pamphlets circulate calling her a usurper, a sorceress, a temptress who led the king astray. Guards confiscate the worst of them, but words once spoken or printed cannot be erased. Personal grief deepens the strain. Early in 1534 Anne suffers another miscarriage, a loss recorded in private letters and whispered with cruel satisfaction by her enemies. Henry masks his disappointment, but the court feels his frustration. He begins to ride more often with his gentlemen, seeking solace in the hunt and the company of those who flatter without question. Among the quiet ladies of the court is Jane Seymour, reserved and mild, whose modesty offers a sharp contrast to Anne's quick tongue. The king notices, still, and refuses to recede into the background. She argues policy with Henry, sometimes in full view of startled counselors. She presses for alliances abroad, speaks sharply when her advice is ignored. To a man accustomed to deference, her assertiveness is both the reason he once loved her and the reason his patience thins. In private chambers, their voices rise, first in passion, then in disagreement. Servants outside the door exchange wary glances but say nothing. Beyond the palace walls, the machinery of the new church grinds forward. Monasteries are surveyed, their treasures catalogued. Cromwell oversees commissioners who note every candlestick, every acre of land. Monks and nuns face the end of their livelihoods. Some resist and face the king's justice. Gold and silver flow into the royal coffers, strengthening Henry's hand and deepening resentment across the countryside. Rebellion brews in the distance like a summer storm. Through all this, Anne's daily life remains a careful performance. She walks the long galleries of Whitehall with measured grace, Elizabeth sometimes in her arms, attendants trailing behind. She hosts scholars at her table, listens to music by candlelight, and writes letters to foreign envoys. Each action is both ordinary and symbolic. The Queen is mother, patron, and living emblem of England's break with Rome. But symbols can fracture. Henry's affection, once so unwavering, begins to flicker. When Anne speaks sharply, he withdraws. When she is tender, he is distracted. Courtiers notice his glances toward Jane Seymour, the gentle lady whose silence offers the king a different kind of comfort. To some, Jane becomes a vessel of hope, a potential new queen who might succeed where Anne has not. Night after night, the Thames carries the sounds of the city to the palace. Boatmen calling across the water, church bells striking the hour, the murmur of markets settling into darkness. Within the royal chambers, the queen waits. She knows the history of women who fail to give a king a son. She knows how quickly admiration can harden into accusation. Her own rise was swift. A fall could be swifter still. As winter lengthens, the court senses the shift. The woman once courted in secret and crowned in defiance now walks a narrower path. Friends grow cautious, enemies bold. Every small misstep is noted, every miscarriage magnified. The crown remains on her head, heavy with expectation, even as the ground beneath begins to tremble. And so the question lingers in the hushed corridors of Whitehall. Can a queen who helped reshape a kingdom hold her place when the very changes she inspired now threaten to consume her? The spring of 1536 settles over London with a deceptive calm. From the river, Whitehall Palace glitters in pale sunlight, banners stirring lightly in the breeze. Inside those thick stone walls, however, quiet steps and closed-door meetings signal that something darker is taking shape. Anne Boleyn still moves with a queen's grace, but each corridor she walks seems lined with watchful eyes. Thomas Cromwell now works with deliberate precision. Once Anne's ally in religious reform, He has turned the full weight of his talent toward her destruction. He begins to gather threads, small, almost invisible, to weave a net around the queen. Musicians, courtiers, servants, even men of low rank are questioned in private chambers. A jest shared in a gallery, a brief touch during a dance, a friendly conversation in a garden. Each detail is written down, reshaped, and recorded as something more. The names accumulate: Henry Norris, the king's close friend; Mark Smeaton, a young musician known for his skill with the lute; Francis Weston and William Brereton, gentlemen of the Privy Chamber; and, most sensationally, George Boleyn, Anne's own brother. Cromwell listens, nods, and files every statement, no matter how improbable. He needs not truth, only a story that will convince a king eager for release. Henry himself provides little resistance. His affection for Jane Seymour grows daily. Courtiers observe the small signs: a lingering hand as he helps her into a barge, a private smile across a crowded hall. Jane's quiet obedience offers a soothing contrast to Anne's sharp wit and frequent challenges. The king, once captivated by Anne's brilliance, now seems almost relieved to imagine a life without her, and senses the change with increasing clarity. She maintains her routines: public prayers, careful attendance at council, affectionate visits with Princess Elizabeth, but beneath her composure she reads the signs. Henry's glances have cooled. Conversations end too quickly. Trusted servants avoid her gaze. She knows the history of queens who fail to give a king a son. She knows, too, that enemies multiply when a monarch's favor wanes. At the end of April, the first blow falls. Mark Smeaton is arrested and questioned for hours. Reports of his confession spread quickly, though no one outside the interrogation chamber knows what he truly said. The next day, Henry Norris is summoned and detained. Within days, Weston and Brereton follow, then George Boleyn. Each arrest is a stone dropped into the still water of the court, sending ripples of fear through every household. Anne receives the news with outward calm. She questions the messengers, demands details, but no clear charges are offered. The accusations, when whispered, are unthinkable: adultery, conspiracy, even treason. For a queen, such crimes carry only one punishment. Still, she believes, perhaps must believe, that the king will not allow such falsehood to stand. After all, he once risked an entire kingdom for her. On May 2nd, the final summons comes, and is ordered to appear before the king's council. She dresses with deliberate care, as if preparing for a royal audience rather than a tribunal, her dark eyes calm beneath the French hood. As she steps into the chamber, the silence is heavy. The counselors present, including men who once bowed to her with easy smiles, inform her she is accused of adultery and treason. She protests with steady voice, denying every charge. Her words, however, are not the point. The decision has already been made. Guards escort her from Whitehall to the Tower of London, the same fortress where she once entered as a queen before her coronation. This time, the mood is entirely different. The great wooden gates close behind her with a thud that seems to echo across the river. From the windows of nearby barges, Londoners watch the royal barge glide toward the tower, some in silence, others murmuring prayers or curses. Within the tower, and is housed in the same royal apartments prepared for her crowning just 3 years earlier. The irony is bitter and unmistakable. She remains composed, greeting the lieutenant of the tower with a calm courtesy that surprises even him. Later, she prays in the small chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, the candlelight flickering against cold stone. Her ladies, chosen by the king's council to report every word, listen as she speaks quietly of her innocence and her faith in God's judgment. In the days that follow, interrogations continue. Witnesses repeat rumors, each retelling more elaborate than the last. Smeaton, under pressure, offers a statement that will be used as proof, though historians will long debate its reliability. Norris, Weston, Brereton, and George Boleyn all deny the charges, But denial carries little weight against the will of a king who now seeks freedom more than justice. Outside the tower, life in London moves forward with the rhythm of early summer. Markets bustle, children play along the narrow lanes. The river carries barges laden with goods. Yet everyone knows that a queen is imprisoned, and gossip flows as freely as the Thames itself. Some speak of witchcraft, others of divine punishment. A few dare to whisper sympathy, but only in the safety of locked rooms. In her quiet cell and writes letters, pleas for mercy, statements of innocence, though she cannot know if Henry will ever read them. She kneels in prayer, her voice steady, the same voice that once charmed a king and challenged an empire. Each evening, the muffled sounds of the city drift through the narrow window. The creak of river timbers, the distant toll of St. Paul's, the faint laughter of Londoners who do not yet know how history will remember this week. Imagine that silence. A queen who once commanded the attention of Europe now waits behind cold walls, her fate in the hands of men who measure loyalty in survival. The court has already begun to shift its allegiance, preparing for a future in which Anne Boleyn is a name spoken carefully, if at all. As night falls over the tower and the moon reflects on the dark river, one question lingers like the tide beneath the stone bridge. When power turns to peril, can a single voice of truth survive the roar of a king's desire for freedom? The morning of May 15th, 1536, breaks pale and cool over the Tower of London. A thin mist drifts from the Thames, softening the outlines of the stone walls and dampening the wooden planks of the wharf. Inside the tower's great hall, benches have been arranged in careful rows. Banners hang limply in the still air. Courtiers, nobles, and officials take their seats in heavy silence, waiting for the spectacle of a queen on trial. And Boleyn walks into this chamber not as the vibrant courtier who once captured a king's heart, but as a prisoner accused of the highest crimes: adultery, incest, and treason. Her gown is simple but dignified, a deep black that absorbs the pale light streaming through the narrow windows. The French hood frames her face, and witnesses later remark on her composure. She greets the peers of the realm with the calm courtesy of a queen, even though many among them have already decided her fate. The charges are read aloud, each one more astonishing than the last. They claim she enticed 5 men, including her own brother, into acts of betrayal. They accuse her of plotting the king's death, of using her influence to corrupt the court. The words echo against the cold stone walls, filling the chamber with a kind of unreal drama. Those who know her best struggle to reconcile these accusations with the woman before them, and listens without flinching. When asked for her plea, she speaks in a voice steady and clear, "Not guilty." She denies every charge, answering each accusation with reasoned calm. She reminds the court of her devotion to the king, of the years she spent as his faithful wife. Her words carry the quiet conviction of one who knows the truth cannot save her, yet will not be silenced. Witnesses are called. Mark Smeaton's alleged confession is repeated, though he is not present. Statements from Norris, Weston, and Brereton are read, each shaped to fit the Crown's narrative. Even the smallest gestures, an innocent dance, a shared conversation, are twisted into evidence of conspiracy. The name of George Boleyn draws a collective murmur. He too faces charges of unspeakable crime, accused of a relationship that no one believes yet few dare to challenge. Throughout the proceedings, Anne maintains her composure. Observers note that she seems less like a condemned prisoner than a sovereign addressing her peers. At moments she allows a brief smile, a flash of the intelligence that once captivated Henry. When she speaks of her marriage, her words carry both dignity and a quiet sorrow. She has loved the king, she says, with all her heart, and if he chooses to end her life, she will submit to God's will. The peers retire to deliberate, but the verdict is never in doubt. When they return, the Duke of Norfolk, Anne's own uncle, delivers the sentence. Guilty on all counts. She is to be burned or beheaded at the king's pleasure. The chamber remains silent as the weight of those words settles over everyone present. Anne bows slightly, her voice unwavering as she replies that she holds no malice toward those who judged her. She commends her soul to God and prays for the king, the very man whose desire once lifted her to a throne and now condemns her to death. Her serenity unsettles even those who came expecting a display of fear. One witness later recalls that she looked never so beautiful as in that moment of quiet acceptance. Outside the hall, London continues its restless life. Merchants call out prices in the markets. Children chase one another through narrow lanes. Barges glide along the river carrying goods and gossip. Yet news of the trial spreads swiftly. In taverns and alleyways, people whisper of the Queen's composure, of the shocking charges, of the King's cold resolve. Some shake their heads in disbelief. Others mutter that it is the judgment of God. That evening, Anne is returned to her lodgings within the tower. The same rooms once prepared for her coronation now serve as the quiet stage of her final days. She prays with her ladies, all of whom have been instructed to report her words to Cromwell. They listen as she speaks gently of her daughter Elizabeth, entrusting the child to God's care. Not once does she curse the king. Not once does she betray anger. Imagine the silence of those nights. The distant toll of church bells across the river, the faint lapping of the tide against the tower's stone base, the flicker of candlelight against cold walls. A queen who once commanded the attention of Europe now waits in stillness, knowing the date of her death will be chosen at another's convenience. Her faith, steady and unshaken, becomes her final act of defiance. Henry does not visit. His mind is already turned toward Jane Seymour, toward the promise of a new marriage and the elusive son he still desires. Courtiers begin to address letters to the Lady Elizabeth, careful to avoid calling the child princess. The machinery of the state moves forward, efficient and unyielding, and so Anne waits. Each morning the sun rises over the gray river, glinting off the tower's weathered stones. Each evening darkness falls, bringing the sound of Londoners finishing their day, unaware, or perhaps unwilling to dwell on, the quiet figure praying in a chamber above the water. As the days pass, one question hangs in the chill air of the tower. When a crown can be given and taken on a king's whim, what remains of justice, and what is left for history to remember? Dawn arrives soft and gray over the Thames on May 19th, 1536. A thin veil of mist hangs low above the river, blurring the outlines of London's rooftops and muffling the cries of gulls. The air carries the damp chill of early morning, a quiet that feels heavier than night. Within the tower, the Queen of England kneels in prayer, her voice low and steady as the first pale light brushes the stone floor. Anne Boleyn has slept little. Her ladies have watched her through the dark hours, noting the calm that seems to hold her upright when sleep could not. She wears a gown of deep damask gray trimmed with crimson at the sleeves, a color of dignity rather than mourning. Over her hair rests the familiar French hood, modest and unadorned. There is no crown now, only the quiet weight of her own resolve. Outside, workmen prepare the scaffold. Wooden boards creak under their hammers, and the faint scent of fresh-cut timber mingles with the damp air. Sand is scattered across the platform to absorb what is to come. Unlike other executions, there will be no axe today. Henry has ordered a swordsman from Calais, an act some call mercy, others a final gesture of control. The French blade will fall more swiftly, more cleanly, than an English axe. As the hour approaches, Anne walks the short distance from her lodging to the green within the tower. The path is lined with guards and a small gathering of witnesses, nobles, officials, and the curious few permitted to watch. Among them are ambassadors who will carry every detail back to their courts. She moves with measured grace, her hands clasped in front of her, her eyes steady. Those who later write of this morning remark on her poise, a calm that unsettles even the sternest faces. When she reaches the scaffold, She ascends the wooden steps without hesitation. The sword lies hidden from her sight, as custom dictates. The crowd falls silent. The early light catches the edges of her gown, casting a faint glow against the gray boards, and turns to address those gathered. Her voice, clear and unwavering, carries across the green. She declares that she comes to die according to the king's will. She will not speak ill of Henry, she says, for he has been a good and gentle sovereign. She asks those present to pray for him and for her. There is no plea for justice, no accusation, only a quiet acceptance. To those who have come expecting bitterness, her words are startling in their grace. After a brief prayer, she kneels upon the straw. Two ladies step forward, gently removing her cloak and tucking her hair beneath the cap to clear the nape of her neck. The morning air is cool against her skin. She whispers a final prayer. To Jesus Christ I commend my soul. Lord Jesus, receive my soul. A phrase that witnesses will later recall in hushed tones. The executioner, dressed in simple dark cloth, approaches silently. He has traveled from France at the king's command, chosen for his skill and swiftness. He kneels before and, asking her pardon. She grants it with a small nod. Tradition holds that he calls to his assistant for the sword, a distraction that draws her eyes away at the last instant. The blade flashes once in the muted light. A single stroke, clean and quick. Those nearest the scaffold barely register the movement before it is done. The crowd exhales, a collective murmur lost to the damp morning air. Her ladies step forward at once, covering the body and gathering the remains with quiet reverence. Within minutes, the green is nearly empty. The witnesses disperse, some crossing themselves, others already rehearsing the words they will write to their masters. The king, miles away, receives word of the deed before the day has fully ripened. By evening, he will be betrothed to Jane Seymour, the woman he hopes will give him the son and could not. Anne's body is placed in an arrow chest, an ordinary wooden box, the sort used for storing weapons. No royal coffin, no elaborate ceremony. She is buried in the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula within the Tower grounds, beneath the stone floor where prisoners of rank are laid to rest. No marker bears her name. The earth closes over her quietly, as though the court's greatest upheaval were only a whisper in the soil. Yet her presence lingers. The small daughter she leaves behind, Elizabeth, will one day sit upon England's throne. The memory of Anne's brief, tumultuous reign will shape the nation's path in ways few can yet imagine. The religious changes set in motion by her marriage to Henry will ripple outward for generations, altering the course of English faith and politics alike. As the day wears on, London resumes its rhythm. Barges drift along the river, merchants call their wares, children chase one another through narrow lanes. The city absorbs the news of its queen's death with a mix of fascination and fatigue. Life continues, indifferent to the fall of a crown. In the quiet of evening, when the last rays of sun catch the spire of St. Paul's, one might imagine the faint echo of Anne's final prayer carried on the wind. Not a cry of defeat, but a simple commendation of a soul to something beyond the reach of kings. Centuries later, visitors to the tower pause at the small memorial within the chapel. They stand where Anne's remains lie, beneath worn stone, and consider the strange symmetry of power and silence. A queen who once commanded the attention of all Europe now rests in a place of unmarked humility. And so the story of Anne Boleyn closes not with the clamor of vengeance, but with the hush of inevitability. Her life, full of ambition and peril, has ended in the space of a morning, yet its consequences stretch far beyond the tower walls. As you reflect on this last dawn, you might wonder, when a life of such intensity can fade to a single quiet moment, what does history truly preserve? The roar of power or the soft endurance of memory? The morning of Anne Boleyn's death settles into history with deceptive speed. By noon on that same day, May 19th, 1536, London streets return to their usual rhythm. Market cries rise over the river's murmur. The smell of roasting meats drifts through narrow lanes, and barges slide along the Thames as though nothing remarkable has happened. Yet quietly word spreads. The Queen is dead. Henry VIII receives the report with brisk satisfaction. Observers record that he dresses in white and rides out to meet Jane Seymour before the day is finished. To the court, this swift turn from execution to betrothal speaks volumes. A queen's life has ended in the morning, and by evening another woman is poised to take her place. The machinery of monarchy moves forward without pause. But outside the palace walls, reactions are more complex. Among the common people, whispers travel from tavern to marketplace. Some mourn a queen they once cheered. Others see her death as proof of God's judgment on a woman many believed ambitious beyond her station. Chroniclers note both sorrow and relief, a city divided between fascination and unease. Across Europe, ambassadors dispatch hurried letters to their sovereigns. In France, in the courts of the Holy Roman Empire, in distant Italian city-states, the news is received with a mixture of shock and recognition. Everyone understands what this means. Henry's break with Rome, already a reality, has now taken an irrevocable step. The Queen who embodied England's defiance of papal authority has been silenced. Yet the religious fracture she helped ignite cannot be undone. Within the Tower Chapel, Anne's body lies beneath the stone floor of St. Peter ad Vincula. There is no grand ceremony, no heraldic flourish. Her remains rest in an unmarked grave beside others who have fallen from favor. Over time, the stone above her will be worn smooth by the passing of countless feet, the memory of her presence fading into the quiet of the chapel's dim light. Yet her influence endures. Only 3 years old, Elizabeth Tudor lives with her own uncertainty. Declared illegitimate, removed from the line of succession, she grows under the care of governesses and tutors chosen with cautious precision. Few could guess that this child, stripped of royal status, would one day reign for nearly half a century and shape an era that still bears her name. For now, England turns its attention to the new queen, Jane Seymour, and to the hope of a male heir. Court officials adjust their loyalties as easily as a change of clothes. Cromwell, who engineered Anne's downfall, gains greater power. Yet even he senses the unstable ground beneath the Tudor throne. The break with Rome continues to stir unrest. Monasteries face dissolution, their lands seized, their monks dispersed. The country shifts uneasily as the old faith and the new order collide. Beyond politics, the memory of Anne Boleyn lingers in quieter ways. In country villages and city parishes, women speak of her intelligence, her boldness, her refusal to accept a life defined by silence. Ballads are whispered, not sung aloud, recounting the rise and fall of a queen who dared to match the will of a king. Some view her as a cautionary tale of ambition, others as a woman punished for her independence. Years later, Elizabeth's own reign will transform those whispers into legend. Historians will debate whether Anne's death was inevitable or the result of Henry's restless temper and Cromwell's calculated schemes. Some will emphasize her charm and wit, others her sharp tongue and political daring. Over centuries, plays, poems, and novels will reshape her image. Sometimes a saint, sometimes a schemer, always a figure who refuses to fade. Imagine the quiet corners of England in the weeks after her execution. A merchant in York hears the news from a traveling peddler and wonders how quickly a crown can fall. A seamstress in Kent recalls seeing the Queen once, riding past in a litter lined with silk, and thinks of the young girl and once was, arriving from the French court with laughter in her voice. Across the countryside, the story grows with each retelling, woven into the slow rhythms of daily life. Even within the palace, Anne's absence leaves a strange echo. Servants who once attended her remember the small details. The scent of her preferred perfumes, the quick tilt of her head when she listened, the sharp clarity of her questions. These fragments, mundane, human, outlast the formal proclamations of the state. Time moves steadily on. Henry's later marriages bring both joy and tragedy, but none of his queens will influence the nation's future as and does through her daughter. When Elizabeth ascends the throne in 1558, she carries her mother's legacy like a quiet ember. Her refusal to marry, her careful balance between faiths, her sharp intelligence, all seem to echo the woman who once walked to the scaffold with unshaken poise. Standing in the tower today, centuries later, visitors step across the worn stones of St. Peter ad Vincula. They pause before the simple memorial that finally bears Anne's name, a small inscription beneath the vaulted ceiling's dim light. Outside, the city hums with modern life. Buses rumble, footsteps echo on the pavement. But within the chapel, a stillness remains. The air holds the weight of lives ended too soon, of history's quiet persistence. As you listen to the story of Anne Boleyn's aftermath, you may feel how power and silence intertwine. A king believed he could erase her, yet her memory reshaped the kingdom. A queen's voice was stilled in a single morning, yet her influence stretches across generations, through faith, through politics, through the reign of a daughter who would not be forgotten. Consider this as the evening settles over the Thames. When the ambitions of rulers crumble and the noise of their courts fades, what remains is not the roar of power, but the enduring echo of a single life, one that continues to question, to inspire, and to remind us how history is never as quiet as it first appears. The year is 1536. Elizabeth Tudor is barely 3 years old when her mother's life ends beneath the sword. She is far too young to grasp the meaning of execution or the shifting tides of courtly politics. Yet from her earliest memories, Elizabeth lives in the long shadow of a story whispered by servants and tutors alike. A story of a mother condemned, a crown lost, and a silence that will shape the child's own destiny. After Anne Boleyn's death, Elizabeth's status changes overnight. Once celebrated as a princess, she is now officially declared illegitimate by Act of Parliament. The title Lady Elizabeth replaces princess, and with it comes a subtle withdrawal of the privileges she once knew. Her household remains intact but grows more modest. The fine silks of infancy give way to simpler fabrics. The guards at her door stand with less ceremony. A small child might not understand the language of treason and annulment, but she feels the difference in how courtiers bow or fail to bow when they pass. Her father, Henry VIII, visits only occasionally. He does not discard her entirely. His affection flickers unpredictably, a candle in an unsteady wind. At times he sends gifts or arranges visits, then vanishes again into the business of new queens and the relentless pursuit of a son. Jane Seymour, gentle and mild, offers a brief kindness during her own short tenure as queen, but she dies soon after birthing Edward, the long-awaited male heir. Elizabeth watches the revolving door of stepmothers, and of Clevies, Catherine Howard, Catherine Parr, each one bringing a new set of rules, a new form of family she must navigate with careful grace. From her mother, though she never truly knew her, Elizabeth inherits a different sort of guidance, a fierce intelligence and a keen sense of survival. Tutors chosen for their learning teach her Latin, Greek, French, and Italian. She devours books, mastering the art of rhetoric and the subtle dance of diplomacy. While other noble children play, she studies. Knowledge becomes her armor, each lesson a quiet rebellion against the fragility of her position. The court, ever restless, watches her with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Some see in her the sharp eyes of Anne Boleyn, the quick wit that once unsettled the king. Others regard her as a pawn, useful only if alliances demand her hand in marriage. Elizabeth learns early the value of silence. She listens more than she speaks, storing away observations of flattery and betrayal, of how swiftly fortunes can rise and fall. During the reign of her younger half-brother Edward, Elizabeth walks a narrow line. Protestant reform surges forward, reshaping churches and customs. She outwardly accepts these changes, yet keeps her private devotions carefully guarded. When Mary, Henry's elder daughter, ascends the throne and restores Catholic worship, Elizabeth again adapts, attending Mass and avoiding open conflict. Each shift is dangerous. Each requires the same cautious balance that her mother once failed to maintain. But Elizabeth survives, a quiet thread weaving through the volatile tapestry of Tudor politics. Letters from this period reveal a mind both disciplined and reflective. Elizabeth writes with precision, her words chosen like stones placed in a strong foundation. She speaks of duty and learning, of the fleeting nature of power. Though she seldom names her mother, a certain undertone lingers, an understanding that her life's course was set the morning Anne Boleyn died. As the years pass, the echoes of Anne's influence become clearer. Elizabeth embraces a love of music and languages that recalls the cultured courts of France where Anne once served. She values debate and sharp reasoning, qualities that marked her mother as both captivating and dangerous. Courtiers note her quick, appraising gaze, the way she measures a room before speaking. Like Anne, she possesses a magnetism that draws attention even in silence. When Mary's reign falters, shadowed by religious unrest and the failure to produce an heir, Elizabeth stands as the natural successor. Yet her claim remains fraught with the question of legitimacy. Foreign ambassadors report endless speculation. Will the daughter of the executed Anne Boleyn ever sit on England's throne? Supporters gather quietly, believing she represents a future beyond the fires of persecution. Enemies whisper of her mother's fate, warning that ambition leads only to the scaffold. Elizabeth endures imprisonment in the Tower for a time, accused of conspiracies she does not confess. As she walks those same stone paths where her mother once awaited execution, she cannot escape the parallel. The walls carry memories of quiet prayers and the final echo of a French sword. But unlike Anne, Elizabeth emerges alive. The lessons of patience and careful calculation, gifts of her mother's legacy and her own keen mind, guide her safely through. In November of 1558, when Mary dies and Elizabeth ascends the throne, the daughter of Anne Boleyn steps into a destiny that once seemed impossible. The child declared illegitimate now wears the crown of England. In her first speech to the council, she speaks with deliberate clarity. She will rule with the heart and stomach of a king, yet she remains a queen. Observers note how her words command the room, as though in herself has returned in a new form, tempered by caution, sharpened by experience. Elizabeth chooses never to marry. Some say it is a political calculation, preserving her independence from foreign powers. Others suspect a deeper reason, an unwillingness to place herself under the authority of any man, perhaps shaped by the memory of a mother destroyed by a husband's will. Whatever her motives, this decision allows her to rule alone, her authority undivided, her legacy her own. Under her guidance, England enters what will be remembered as the Elizabethan Age, a time of exploration, literature, and relative stability. The arts flourish, ships venture to distant shores. The kingdom finds a fragile balance between Protestant and Catholic factions. Her reign lasts 44 years, outliving nearly all who doubted her. In portraits she appears resplendent, draped in jewels and lace, the image of sovereignty. Yet behind the carefully crafted image lies the steady rhythm of the child who once listened in silence, learning how power can be both weapon and shield. In quiet moments, one might imagine Elizabeth reflecting on the mother she barely knew. Perhaps she remembers stories told by old attendants, Anne's quick laughter, her sharp mind, her unshaken dignity at the end. Perhaps she walks the gardens at dusk and thinks of the woman whose blood gave her both life and caution. History does not record these private thoughts, but the choices of her reign suggest a constant, if unspoken, inheritance. Today, visitors to the Tower of London stand where both mother and daughter once faced their most dangerous hours. They trace the worn stones, listen to the echo of their own footsteps, and feel how past and present blur. The silence of those chambers speaks of survival as much as loss. Anne's life ended in a morning, but her legacy endures in the golden years of Elizabeth's rule. Consider this as evening settles over the river. A woman condemned to oblivion becomes, through her child, a force that reshapes a nation. The crown Henry sought to control passes finally to the daughter of the queen he tried to erase. Power proves less permanent than memory, and memory, carried quietly across generations, becomes the truest inheritance of all. Picture England in the decades after Anne Boleyn's death, a land that bears little resemblance to the kingdom she once knew. When she walked the halls of court, the country still knelt, at least outwardly, to the authority of the Pope. Monasteries dotted the landscape, their bells marking the rhythm of daily prayer. Pilgrims still journeyed to shrines, candles flickering before ancient relics. By the time her daughter Elizabeth reaches the height of her reign, much of that world has vanished. Henry VIII begins the transformation soon after Anne's fall. The break with Rome, once a personal dispute over his marriage, becomes a state policy. Monasteries are dissolved. Their lands are seized and sold to nobles eager for profit. Ancient libraries are scattered, their manuscripts used to wrap goods in market stalls or left to rot in damp corners. Stone walls that once echoed with chants crumble into quiet ruins. Across the countryside, farmers and laborers watch these changes with uneasy eyes, their faith and livelihoods disrupted by royal decree. Anne had hoped her marriage would secure not only a son but also a stronger, more independent England. In a way, she receives half her wish. The nation grows independent indeed, richer in crown lands, freer from papal influence, but at a cost she never imagined. Religious rebellion brews. Uprisings like the Pilgrimage of Grace challenge the king's policies, only to be crushed with ruthless force. Villages that once revolved around monastic life now face new landlords, higher rents, and the slow erosion of old traditions. Through the reigns of Henry's later wives and heirs, the pendulum of religion swings back and forth. Under Edward VI, Protestant reforms accelerate. Under Mary I, Catholic rites return, accompanied by the smoke of martyrdom. By the time Elizabeth claims the throne, England is weary of violent change. She understands this and fashions a settlement both practical and cautious. A Church of England independent from Rome, yet broad enough to allow quiet diversity of belief. Her approach carries echoes of her mother's political instinct, firm in sovereignty, subtle in execution. The England of Elizabeth's maturity thrives in unexpected ways. Trade routes stretch outward to the Mediterranean and the New World. Merchants grow wealthy, and London swells with people seeking work and opportunity. Streets that once bustled only with local markets now host goods from distant coasts. Spices, silks, strange fruits that draw curious crowds. The city's skyline changes as new theaters rise. Simple wooden structures at first, later the great playhouses where a young playwright named William Shakespeare begins to shape the English tongue into something enduring. It is an England alive with contradictions. Grand new mansions built beside crumbling abbeys, Protestant sermons delivered in churches still smelling faintly of incense. In this restless mix of old and new, one can almost sense Anne's presence, not in the bricks and stones, but in the tension between tradition and transformation. She never lived to witness these changes, yet her life and death set many of them in motion. Beyond religion and trade, the role of women shifts subtly, if not dramatically. Elizabeth's long reign as a single, powerful queen proves that a woman can rule a nation without a husband or heir. Noble women begin to claim a little more space in intellectual life, commissioning translations, writing letters that influence policy, hosting salons of quiet debate. Common women still face the hard limits of their age, yet they, too, observe the example of a queen who stands alone at the center of power. It is not equality, but it is a crack in the old certainty that only men can govern. Imagine, and had she been granted a glimpse of this future. She might have marveled at the theaters where crowds gather to watch histories and comedies in the open air. She would have recognized the French fashions that persist in courtly dress, the music blending English melodies with continental styles. She might have smiled to see her daughter portrayed in grand portraits, robed in pearls and gold, a sovereign in her own right. And perhaps she would have felt a bittersweet pride in the cautious religious balance Elizabeth maintains, a settlement that avoids the extremes that cost so many lives during the years of upheaval. Outside London, the countryside continues its slow, steady rhythm. Farmers plow the same fields their ancestors tended, though now under new ownership. The ruins of monasteries stand as silent witnesses to the king's reforms. Ivy-clad arches, roofless naves open to the sky. Travelers pass them and remember the stories of saints and relics, even as they adapt to the new order. Life is harder for many, yet the spirit of endurance, the quiet persistence of ordinary people, carries the nation forward. For visitors in later centuries, these landscapes hold a different resonance. The Tower of London, once a working fortress, becomes a place of memory. Tourists walk the green where Anne Boleyn died, pausing before the small memorial that finally bears her name. They step into the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula and sense the weight of centuries in the dim light. Outside, the city roars with modern energy, but within those walls the silence of history remains. Historians debate Anne's true influence. Was she a reformer at heart, or simply a queen whose personal ambition aligned with a larger movement? Was her fall the result of her own sharp wit and strong will, or the inevitable outcome of a king's desire for change? The questions remain open, centuries later, because the evidence is as layered and complex as the woman herself. What is certain is that the England she left behind did not stay still. From the ashes of her execution grew a nation transformed, religiously independent, culturally vibrant, politically assertive. Elizabeth's reign, the so-called Golden Age, stands as both a tribute to her mother's legacy and a testament to the unpredictable course of history. As evening settles over the Thames, imagine the river carrying reflections of both past and present. The glow of Elizabethan lanterns mirrored in the same waters where barges once bore the condemned queen to the Tower. Time folds quietly, and the sound of distant bells drifts across the city, neither entirely Catholic nor entirely Protestant, but something uniquely English. Consider this as the night deepens. Anne Boleyn never walked the streets of this New England, never heard the verses of its poets or saw the ships that would carry its flag around the globe. Yet without her life and her death, this England might never have come to be. History, it seems, belongs not only to those who rule longest, but also to those whose brief, brilliant presence changes the course of everything that follows. Close your eyes and let time stretch far beyond the 16th century. The sound of Tudor London fades, replaced by the slow ticking of centuries. Brick by brick, the city changes. Wooden homes give way to stone terraces. Market cries grow into the hum of an industrial capital. Yet Anne Boleyn's name does not slip away. Instead, it lingers, a quiet refrain in the background of English history. In the 17th century, scholars and pamphleteers revisit her story to argue about religion and monarchy. Protestants praise her as a martyr for reform, a queen who helped break the power of Rome. Catholics write of her as a cunning interloper who brought tragedy upon the kingdom. Both sides shape her memory to suit their needs. The woman who once walked among courtiers becomes a symbol, stretched to fit the quarrels of later generations. The Tower of London remains her most constant witness. Through civil war and plague, the fortress endures. Guards pace the same stones where she once waited for judgment. Visitors whisper tales of her ghost, describing a pale figure gliding near the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula. Some speak of a carriage without horses, driven by a headless lady on the anniversary of her death. Whether these stories are believed or not, they feed a slow, enduring fascination. By the 18th century, history itself becomes an art of public display. Antiquarians catalog ruins and preserve relics. Anne's portraits are copied and engraved for collectors. Her letters, carefully saved by diplomats and servants, are printed for a reading public hungry for royal drama. Gentlemen and ladies of leisure debate her character in drawing rooms lit by candles and oil lamps. Was she a victim of tyranny or an ambitious schemer? Opinions differ, but curiosity never fades. Across the ocean, in the young United States, her name also travels. American Protestants, proud of their break from an established church, find in her a distant figure of independence. Writers compare her courage to the resolve of the colonists. They speak of her as a mother of liberty, though she never could have imagined such a title. History bends to the needs of each new audience, and Anne's image bends with it. The 19th century brings fresh layers of remembrance. Novelists and poets, drawn to the romance of Tudor intrigue, place her at the center of their tales. Painters depict her last moments in moody oils, the scaffold bathed in dawn light, the executioner's sword gleaming faintly. Victorian visitors file through the tower, guided by warders in bright uniforms. They pause before the spot said to mark her beheading and lower their voices to a reverent hush. The real woman remains elusive, but the atmosphere, part tragedy, part spectacle, captures the public imagination. Meanwhile, historians sift the archives with increasing care. They weigh the charges against her: adultery, treason, incest, and find them thin. Records of court politics reveal a web of ambition and fear. Many conclude that her fall was less about personal sin than about power. A king who had tired of his queen and a court eager to please him. In these studies, Anne becomes less a sinner or saint and more a figure trapped by forces larger than herself. Into the 20th century, her story moves easily into new forms. Silent films flicker with black and white dramatizations. Later, radio plays carry her voice into households on quiet evenings. Novelists imagine her thoughts in long inner monologues. Playwrights give her sharp, unforgettable dialogue. Each retelling reflects the era that creates it, sometimes portraying her as a feminist before her time, sometimes as a cautionary tale about ambition. Through it all, the facts of her brief life remain the steady spine of the narrative. Tourists continue to walk the tower's stone paths. Guides recount the morning of May 19, 1536. The cool air, the crowd of silent onlookers, the French executioner summoned for his skill. They point to the small glass panel in the chapel floor where she is believed to rest. Visitors leave flowers, notes, and small tokens, acts of remembrance for a queen they know only through stories. In the stillness of the chapel, the centuries seem to fold together. Even in the digital age, Anne Boleyn's presence endures. Online archives share scans of her letters, the loops of her handwriting visible on a glowing screen. Scholars debate new findings in virtual forums. Television series and films reach audiences around the world, blending careful research with the drama of entertainment. Viewers far from England learn her name, drawn into the same mixture of intrigue and sorrow that captured imaginations centuries before. Her daughter Elizabeth remains the more celebrated monarch, but Anne's influence can be felt whenever the independence of the English Church is discussed, whenever the complexity of Tudor politics is explored, and whenever the idea of a powerful woman standing against expectation is admired. She is not forgotten, because forgetting her would mean overlooking a turning point in the story of England itself. Think of this enduring resonance. A queen who reigned for less than 3 years continues to speak across almost 5 centuries. Her life reminds us that history is not always about long rule or great battles. Sometimes it is a brief moment, a marriage, a birth, an execution, that redirects an entire nation. The echo of that moment rolls forward, shaping lives and ideas long after the original sound has faded. As night deepens, imagine standing on Tower Green after the day's visitors have gone. The city hum beyond the walls grows faint. A soft wind moves across the grass where the scaffold once stood. You feel the weight of years in the stones beneath your feet, the quiet persistence of memory. Anne Boleyn's story is neither entirely tragic nor wholly triumphant. It is simply lasting, woven into the slow, continuous fabric of history, where even the briefest lives can leave an unending trace. Let the centuries keep turning until you arrive quietly in the present day. England is no longer a kingdom of candlelit chambers and horse-drawn barges. Jet engines cut across the skies, and glass towers rise where timbered markets once stood. Yet Anne Boleyn's name is still spoken, softly in classrooms, boldly on television screens, and reverently by those who step into the Tower of London. Modern historians continue to peel back the layers of rumor and propaganda. They examine diplomatic letters, court records, and scraps of personal correspondence, asking familiar questions with new methods. DNA analysis helps confirm the lineage of monarchs. High-resolution scans of her surviving portraits reveal underpainted details. The tilt of a mouth, the glint of a jewel, the quiet confidence of a woman who knew the stakes of every glance. What once depended on rumor now benefits from technology. Yet mystery remains. Popular culture reshapes her image again and again. Stage plays and films portray her as a political strategist, a romantic heroine, or a cautionary figure consumed by ambition. Streaming series bring her voice to millions who might never open a history book. Each adaptation reflects the questions of its own time. How does a woman navigate power in a world built to deny it? What price is paid for challenging an established order? Viewers debate these ideas as if and still walks among them. In university lecture halls, her story sparks discussions about religion, gender, and the nature of monarchy. Professors trace how her marriage to Henry VIII helped set England on a path toward constitutional change. Students compare her fate with that of women in other royal courts. Catherine de' Medici in France, Isabella of Castile in Spain, searching for patterns of survival and loss. The conversations drift outward to the present. How public opinion can shape a leader's destiny, how private lives and public policy become entwined. The tower itself remains a focal point. Visitors from every continent queue beneath its gray walls. They walk the same cobbled path that carried Anne to her execution, pausing at the small glass plaque that marks the supposed spot of the scaffold. Some leave flowers, some whisper a prayer, others simply stand in silence, letting the weight of history settle over them like the cool London mist. Museums and archives curate exhibitions devoted to her life. Manuscripts, jewelry fragments, and replicas of Tudor gowns rest beneath carefully lit glass. Audio guides play a gentle narration, recounting the steady rise and sudden fall of a queen who changed the direction of a kingdom. Children lean close to the cases, wide-eyed, as though they might catch the echo of her voice in the hush. For many modern observers, Anne becomes a symbol of resilience. Writers describe her as an early figure of female agency, one who asserted her own worth in an age that allowed women little influence. Others caution against turning her into a modern heroine, reminding us that she was also a product of her time. Ambitious, pragmatic, willing to play the dangerous game of court politics. Both views contain truth, and together they keep her story alive in nuanced form. Beyond England, her legacy ripples outward. Genealogists trace lines of descent that connect her daughter Elizabeth to royal families across Europe. Political historians examine how the English Reformation influenced the spread of Protestant thought in distant lands. Even casual tourists carry a fragment of her memory home, retelling the story to friends and family, ensuring that the name Anne Boleyn continues to travel. Think for a moment about the persistence of that name. She reigned as queen for less than 3 years. Her life was brief, her end swift. Yet the consequences of her choices, marrying a king, bearing a daughter, challenging the established faith, still shape the world. The Church of England, born from the upheaval of her marriage, remains a cornerstone of British identity. Elizabeth I, the daughter who once seemed a disappointment, became a monarch whose reign defined an era. Through them, Anne's influence endures far beyond her lifetime. Now imagine standing once more in the quiet chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula after the day's final visitors have left. The electric lights dim, leaving only a soft golden glow. Stone walls, worn smooth by centuries, hold a calm that feels almost timeless. Somewhere beneath the floor lies Anne's resting place, unmarked for years, later honored with a simple inscription. The city outside hums with modern life, but within these walls the centuries collapse into a single, steady silence. Her story reminds us that history is rarely neat. It is a tapestry of human choices, some deliberate, some accidental, woven into patterns we only recognize long after the fact. Anne Boleyn's brief, brilliant, and tragic life became one of those pivotal threads. Through ambition and courage, through love and loss, she altered the course of a nation. And through the patient work of memory, she continues to speak, inviting each generation to look back and wonder. Pause with that thought as you drift toward rest. The echo of her footsteps fades, yet the influence remains, quiet and unbroken, in the modern mind. Let your thoughts settle into the stillness of the present moment. The sounds of the outside world, traffic, voices, the faint rhythm of your own breath, become distant. Now imagine the long corridor of history stretching backward, its walls lined with memories. At the far end stands Anne Boleyn, her figure small yet unmistakable, a single candle flickering against a vast night. Her life offers lessons that speak not only to scholars and historians but to anyone willing to pause and listen. They are not loud lessons of battle or conquest. They are quiet ones, drawn from patience, resolve, and the strange interplay of chance and choice. The first lesson is the power of agency, even within limits, and lived in a time when a woman's path was shaped almost entirely by family and marriage. Yet she learned languages, absorbed the politics of European courts, and chose when to accept or refuse a king's advances. She understood that her words, her manner, even the tilt of her head could carry weight. Agency, for her, was subtle, found in the spaces between expectation and opportunity. That subtle agency still resonates today, reminding you that influence need not always be loud or forceful to be real. Another lesson rests in impermanence. Anne rose from a noble household to the throne of England, only to fall with astonishing speed. One spring morning she was queen. By another morning she was condemned. This swift reversal reminds us how fragile status can be. Titles, possessions, and the applause of a crowd can vanish almost overnight. What remains is character. The poise with which she faced accusation, the dignity she maintained on the scaffold, the final words spoken with clarity even as the world closed in. From her, you may learn that identity lies not in what you hold, but in how you meet what you cannot control. Consider, too, the lesson of unintended influence. Anne sought to secure her position, to give Henry a son, to shape the court around her. Instead, her greatest impact came after her death. A daughter who became one of England's most remarkable monarchs, and a national church born from the circumstances of her marriage. She did not plan these outcomes, yet they endure. Your own actions, small choices, passing remarks, may also ripple outward in ways you cannot foresee. There is also a quiet truth about memory itself. Anne's contemporaries recorded her life with bias and motive. Enemies called her manipulative. Allies praised her courage. Centuries of historians, novelists, and filmmakers have added their interpretations. Across time, her image has shifted like a figure seen through moving water. From this we learn that history is never a fixed portrait. It is a conversation between the past and the present, reshaped with each retelling. What we remember about and says as much about us as it does about her. As you reflect, notice how these lessons, agency, impermanence, unintended influence, the fluidity of memory, are not grand declarations. They are gentle reminders, arriving almost as whispers. They invite you to slow down and to see the connections between your own life and the distant life of a Tudor queen. Imagine walking once more through the Tower grounds at dusk. The evening air carries the scent of damp stone and river mist. Lanterns flicker along the walls, their light pooling softly on the worn paths. You pause near the chapel where and rests. The grass is cool beneath your feet. Above, a single star emerges in the deepening blue. In that quiet, the centuries collapse. You feel the nearness of a woman who lived, chose, suffered, and left behind echoes that still reach you now. Let the scene grow softer. The lanterns dim. The starry sky spreads wider. You sense the rhythm of your breathing, steady and calm, like the slow tide of the Thames beyond the walls. The lessons of Anne Boleyn are not demands. They are gentle companions for your own journey. To act with intention, to accept change, to trust that meaning may emerge long after the moment has passed. And as you rest with these thoughts, you may realize the final, most peaceful lesson of all. That every life, brief or long, celebrated or obscure, has the power to shape the world in ways unseen. Anne's candle still burns in the corridors of memory, steady and quiet, offering its light to anyone who lingers long enough to notice. Night has settled over London. The city beyond the Tower walls glows with quiet lights. Office windows, street lamps, the occasional flicker of a passing boat. But here, on the riverbank near the old fortress, the sound is softer. You hear the slow lap of the Thames against the stone embankment, a rhythm that has never ceased, not even for the great dramas of kings and queens. Stand here in your mind and let the present fade. Picture the river as Anne Boleyn once knew it. Wide and brown, carrying barges heavy with grain and timber, glinting faintly under moonlight. It was along these waters that she traveled to the Tower for the last time, the oars dipping in perfect unison, the current carrying her toward fate. The same tide still moves beneath you now, indifferent and eternal. Think of how many have walked these banks since her day. Merchants unloading cargo from distant ports, soldiers returning from war, families strolling in the gentle air of evening. Each of them part of a story that overlaps with hers, though they may never have spoken her name. History is not a straight line but a gathering of countless footsteps, all leaving faint marks that the river slowly wears away. Look across the water toward the spires and towers of modern London. The skyline is a forest of steel and glass, bridges arched in light, skyscrapers glowing against the night sky, and would not recognize this city, yet its heartbeat remains the same. Markets bustle by day, voices rise in taverns and cafes. The river carries goods and dreams to the sea. Life continues as it always has, reshaping itself around memory and change. In the hush of the riverbank, consider the path of Anne's life one final time. From her early years in the Netherlands and France, absorbing courtly manners and languages, to her careful dance of intellect and charm that drew a king away from his queen, to the brief, dazzling height of queenship and the sudden, brutal fall. Every stage of that journey is bound now to the history of England, like stones set into the riverbed, unseen beneath the surface, but unmovable. Her story is more than tragedy. It is a meditation on power, how it rises, how it slips away, how it lingers even after death. It is a reminder that the human spirit can shape nations, even when the individual life is brief. Through and came Elizabeth, and through Elizabeth came a new sense of English identity, cultural, religious, and political, that still resonates centuries later. Pause and let that realization settle like the tide around your feet. The river continues its patient flow, carrying reflections of the moon and the city lights. Each ripple touches the next, spreading outward in endless circles. So too does influence move through time, from one life to countless others, never fully visible but always present. If you listen closely, you might imagine a faint echo across the water, the creak of oarlocks from a long-vanished barge, the distant murmur of a courtier's voice, the soft rustle of a queen's gown. These are only whispers of memory, but they remind you that the past is never entirely gone. It waits in places like this, between stone and river, shadow and light. As you stand with the Thames beside you, you may feel a quiet connection to Anne Boleyn. Not the queen of legend, nor the figure painted by historians, but the woman who once breathed the same night air and looked upon this same river. Her fears, her hopes, her final moments are part of a shared human story that continues to flow, like the water beneath your gaze. Let the sound of the river guide your breathing. Inhale with the slow pull of the tide. Exhale with its gentle release. Allow the centuries to fold softly around you. Tudor barges, Victorian bridges, modern lights, each layer resting calmly in the dark. The lessons of Anne's life remain. Act with quiet agency. Accept the transience of status and circumstance. Trust that influence often reveals itself long after you have let go. These truths, simple and enduring, drift toward you like the river's own current. Now the night deepens. The moon slides higher, silvering the rooftops and casting a soft path across the water. The city settles into silence, and the tower stands unmoved, a sentinel of memory. You breathe evenly, at peace with the knowledge that history is not distant. It lives here, in the gentle wash of the Thames, in the stones beneath your feet, and in the quiet persistence of a name, Anne Boleyn. As you drift toward rest, hold that image lightly, the calm river, the steady tower, the echo of a life that changed a nation. No more words are needed, only the slow rhythm of water and the timeless truth that every story, even one marked by loss, can flow onward, shaping the world long after the final breath. The night is at its quietest now. London's movement has slowed to a near stillness. The Thames glides in gentle darkness, carrying only the soft shimmer of moonlight. Here, at the close of Anne Boleyn's long echo through history, you stand with a sense of quiet completion. Her life began in a world of small, candlelit rooms and wide, green fields. She learned the elegance of European courts, the careful grace of diplomacy, and the subtle power of words and timing. She chose when to retreat and when to step forward, crafting a path few women of her age could imagine. Her rise was sudden and brilliant, her fall swift and merciless. Yet from that brief, vivid span came a lasting influence that no scaffold could erase. Think again of the daughter she left behind. Elizabeth, once dismissed as an unwelcome girl, grew into a monarch whose rule shaped the language, culture, and direction of England. The Elizabethan age of exploration, theater, and enduring literature would not have existed without the mother who risked everything to bring her into the world. Through Elizabeth, Anne's presence endures in every English word written for the stage, every voyage that carried the flag across oceans, every lasting vision of a powerful, independent nation. But Anne's legacy is not only political or royal. It is personal, woven into the quiet recognition of how a single life can ripple through time. Her courage under accusation, her dignity at the moment of death, and the calm grace of her final words remain examples of resilience. She reminds us that strength is not always loud. Sometimes it is the still voice that does not falter when the crowd falls silent. Imagine her final morning once more, but now with a softer lens. The tower green damp with dew, a faint mist lifting from the river, the small circle of witnesses holding their breath, and steps forward, her dark eyes steady, her posture composed. The sword flashes and the world changes course. From that quiet instant, centuries unfold. Nations shift, faiths divide, ideas of power and gender bend and reform. One woman's life, brief yet luminous, sets those motions in play. In the centuries since, countless visitors have walked where she walked, tracing the same stone paths, pausing before the same chapel door. Some come seeking history, others come seeking something more elusive, a connection across time. a reminder that human lives, though fleeting, can leave marks no wind or water can erase. Flowers laid in silence, a hand resting lightly on cool stone, a name spoken aloud in the hush of evening. These small gestures keep her presence near. Today, her story continues to inspire reflection far beyond England. Writers across the world find in her a symbol of complex courage. Teachers introduce her to students as a window into the turbulent birth of modern Europe. Artists paint her likeness again and again, each brushstroke a conversation with the past. Even in the shifting landscape of digital memory, her voice endures. Letters preserved, portraits restored, documentaries streamed across continents. Wherever history is told with care, her name finds its place. Now let that awareness settle into your own quiet thoughts. Consider how every life, even one measured in just a few decades, carries possibilities far greater than we can see. A single decision, a single moment of resolve, may reach farther than centuries of ordinary time. And Boleyn's story is proof that influence is not the property of kings alone. It belongs to anyone who lives with intention and meets the turning of fate with steadiness. The river outside continues its timeless rhythm. Inhale with its slow rise, exhale with its gentle fall. The tower stands as it did before her birth and after her death, but within its stones her memory breathes. Every passing breeze, every faint ripple of water, carries her presence forward. As you rest, hold the image of that enduring flame. A queen who lived boldly, a mother whose child reshaped a nation, a woman whose quiet strength still speaks across nearly 500 years. Her candle has never gone out. It glows softly in history's long night, steady and warm. Close your eyes to that gentle light. Let the sound of the Thames become the sound of your own breath. Slow, calm, unbroken. And Boleyn's journey has reached its end, yet the echo remains, guiding you into peaceful sleep. The past is quiet now. The story is complete. Good night.